Hey, Connor. Welcome to Automate All the Things.
Thank you. Exciting. Number two.
I know. Who would have thought we would make it to two no-code talks?
That is true. But yeah, no, the first one was fun. So why not continue?
Yeah, and we're also joined today by Connor and his squeaky chair. So the squeaky chair
Yes.
is still part of the stream. Let us know in the chat if you're joining with us. We're going to jump into like questions in about 5 minutes here. And it seemed like a lot of folks had questions, so now's a good time to go ahead and drop them in the chat. But Connor, talk to a little about what's happened since the last month. What's been on your mind?
Well, it's been a busy month. I've been working on a lot of little projects. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I've just been pumped for this conversation here. And yeah.
Awesome. So what we wanted to kind of chat about is, and I wrote about it in the newsletter today, is, Connor and I speak every week. And, last couple of weeks, we've been kind of musing on if we had the capabilities and if we had the skills, what would we build for as a no-code tool, right? Like looking at the work that we do and the work that people ask us to do, kind of what tool is missing in our toolbox. So I haven't told Connor what my answer would be, and Connor hasn't told me his. So I'm curious, Connor, what's missing from your no-code toolbox?
Okay, so I've actually got two. So first of all, just for a little bit of context, the main tools that I use to build no-code projects are Webflow, Airtable, and Zapier. And I think one problem that a lot of people have that use these tools is the just testing in general. So you have to basically test your workflows and your website builds in production. And even though there are things like staging sites that you have with Webflow, for example, the .webflow.io domain, it becomes incredibly difficult to test workflows through, for example, Zapier or Airtable if you've got your Webflow site published on two different types of domains. And so a lot of the time, all we end up being able to do is to basically just test our sites in production, which, is a bit filthy. Let's be honest
Yeah.
here. It's not like what the developers do. Let's be honest here. So, if I had to create something for the Airtable Webflow Zapier world, I would probably say building something that allows you to test your sites, your workflows, without having to publish it to a live site would be something that would be incredibly useful. So that's tool number one. Does that make sense?
Totally. I have a lot of stories at my old company where I would push things into production and then spend the rest of the day apologizing to everyone that the workflow didn't quite work the way you want. And I'm curious, from your perspective, is this just a question of each tool putting in a staging environment, or is this a question more of visibility, right? So having one tool communicate to another to say, hey, when you're going to do this in this tool, it's going to go ahead and trigger these other things. So just be aware of that.
I mean, it can be a bit of both. I think anything in this space would be pretty useful at this point. I think the main issue is that a lot of the tools don't really work with each other in a testing environment. For example, when you use Zapier, it only recognizes your site ID. It doesn't recognize whether it's published to just
Right.
the .webflow.io domain and all that kind of stuff. So just a way for you to be able to potentially test your workflows just on your .webflow.io domain would be just a huge step forward in basically being able to make sure that what you end up publishing to your live site is up to par in terms of like the quality of what it is. And, it's not really a problem when you're building out your MVP, but
Mm-hmm.
over time, as you start building out additional features, I think it's quite common that you accidentally publish stuff that you didn't intend to publish
Right.
because you otherwise can't test your workflows inside of something like Zapier or Integromat.
Love it. Yeah, I
So
totally agree. I putting out a feature request to all no code tools, give us staging, or create a tool that gives us staging across all of our tools.
So that's number one. Number two, and this is very specific to projects that I work on. So I build a lot of like marketplaces and directories, and a lot of the no-code tools that are out there are not really set up for marketplaces, at least at the moment. So, for example, transactional marketplaces where, for example, someone clips the ticket on payments and stuff like that, just there has been no tool for that unless you involve developers. Now, obviously, Stripe is working on the no-code version of Connect, which I think will be an absolute game changer because especially as soon as they release a few endpoints, upgrade their Zapier integration, you'll be able to build all sorts of directories where you can process payments and then just automatically pay out your customers. But there are a whole bunch of other use cases that come up somewhat frequently that just don't have any good suitable tools out there. One of them is, and this might seem very, very niche, but for example, coaching sites, the ability for you to book a calendar, book in one of the coach's calendars and process a payment. And so at the moment, the only real workaround with that is using Calendly. But the problem is that unless you upgrade to like a pretty expensive like Calendly team account, it's you can only really embed their Calendlys, and therefore you kind of get cut out of the actual transaction, which kind of doesn't make it a marketplace. And so just because of how often I've come across that use case in projects that I've worked on, I'll probably work on something like that.
Yeah. And I that's pretty niche though. I have to say, like, that line between a feature and a vertical, like, hey, if you want to build these coaching marketplaces, just use our tool that will build it out from scratch instead of like, collecting 4, 5, 6, 7 tools to get it done. Right. And so I think that's the line that most founders are kind of like, is this a tool? Is this a feature of another tool? Right.
Yeah.
And I think us as people who do this all day long, or especially you with marketplaces, you kind of find these areas, right? And so it's interesting that you would build essentially a Calendly or like, your calendar payment integration that then gets embedded into other builds.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, like, it is incredibly niche. I think it serves especially the marketplace, like the no-code marketplace kind of niche. And that in itself is still pretty small, but it's kind of evolving. But yeah, that is definitely something that hopefully Calendly could work on at some point, because it has a lot of like use cases. But I think in a way, like, this is kind of what's exciting about the no-code space is like, it's a very emerging kind of industry, which means that all these use cases are starting to pop up, and that kind of creates the opportunity to create solutions for it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So mine is very different.
Yeah.
Mine is, and I was thinking about this, like, what is the biggest challenge that I have in terms of automation? And we had Sarah Du on about 2 weeks ago, and she showed us Alloy automation. So check out, I think it's runalloy.com. And, I came into it thinking, like, why do I need an e-commerce automation tool? Like, can't I just use Integromat or Zapier? But then she showed me how many endpoints they integrate with Shopify, which was over 150. So literally, like, person updates information, or person reaches the checkout page. Person is 2 days, there's no limit to what those triggers are. And it kind of made me realize that, like, I don't really need Zapier anymore. No, personally, like, as a content creator, like, I can either use Airtable automations for 95% of what I need, but what I would love is like Zapier for YouTubers or Zapier for content creators. And what that is like integrates with the live API. Lets me create a workflow around people sending me a live stream chat, right? And maybe putting those into my Airtable base. Being able to reuse past streams, right? There's so much kind of finicky stuff as a content creator that I would pay hundreds of dollars a month to automate. But Zapier kind of solves for that most popular use case, which is I want to upload a video to YouTube, right? And I could do that from Airtable, but I can't schedule a stream. I can't change a thumbnail. I can't update descriptions. I can't
Right.
like block people or mute people or tweet a comment, right? And all of those are so much more important to me as someone who has the kind of basics covered. So my kind of wish for no-code tools is more vertical automation tools, right? So that might be a vertical automation tool for ads, right? You run Google Ads. I'm sure it's pretty hard to run from Zapier, right? Or Facebook or kind of reporting. Another might be e-commerce, content creators. There's really kind of no limit to how you could slice and dice the knowledge worker person, if you will, or their jobs into their own kind of vertical automation tools. So my request or my dream is that first, for content creators, if anyone wants to create an automation tool around YouTube and Twitch and as content creators, you'll have your first 2 customers in myself and Connor for sure. But I do think the future of automation is much more vertical than we think, just because of there's so many APIs that need to be integrated at such a level of depth, and that people are willing to pay a lot of money for integrating 5 or 6 or 7 APIs at a very deep level and just kind of integrate with the rest at a surface level. I really think that that's both the future and kind of my request for automation tools broadly. Whew, that was a lot.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And I completely agree. Especially, I think the content creator one is really interesting because I agree, like, you can't really do that much with Zapier beyond just uploading things. A lot of the things that I have to do, I do manually.
Right, same.
Like, it just doesn't, like, even sometimes the most basic workflows in Zapier are not that great. So, no, it makes sense. I definitely feel, especially considering the lack of ability to code for a lot of content creators, that would be something that would be really useful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So those are our wishes. Let us know in the chat what your requests are, and that'll be like kind of a way to put them into the ether. Connor and I are probably not going to be the people who create these because we're no coders, and so we're not necessarily going to be able to build all that stuff. But love the insights. Okay, cool. So we actually have a lot of questions coming up. So I saw Joe mentioned that he has some questions, so drop those in the chat. I do have a question from Kyle that I'm going to go ahead and kind of play here. So let's go down to my screen. So Connor, I'm going to share my screen with you. There we go. Let me know that you can see my screen. Boom. Should be good to go.
Yep.
And we've got a question from Kyle. So let me just go ahead and play that. Boom. Kyle's got a professional setup, so it's nice.
My question today is about aggregate data. I've got a situation where companies are submitting a form, and they are telling me about their employees. And I want to then, after they have submitted a form, told me about all their employees, I want to then do a automation for all of the data that's come in. So I do a lot with document automation and form stack documents specifically. So I might need to take all of that information and then feed it into take that aggregate information and feed it into an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe I'm generating a PDF report. But it might be, I might want to do it on the whole group. I might want to do it on like the subgroup. Maybe there's the companies, I want to say all the restaurants. I want to do a report on all the restaurants. And so then I run a report on restaurants. So, and then maybe I want to actually loop through all of the records. Once I hit that button, I want to loop through all the records and generate individual reports for each record and a report for the aggregate. So, wondering if you've run into anything like that. Is that a parabola thing? Airtable possibly? I don't know. So, wanted to get your thoughts on that. So, that is my question. Hopefully that makes sense.
All right. Could folks hear that? I'm saying so it might not be super strong because I'm getting muted. So I'm just going to drop that link if anyone wants to hear it. But the question from Kyle is, how do we work with, I'll say, multiple records, so multiple inputs in a way that's a little more dynamic? So give me a thumbs up in the chat. Connor, I'm gonna take this one if that's okay with you.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so folks can hear it. Awesome. So Kyle's question is really interesting, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the answer is there are multiple ways to work with multiple inputs. So Kyle, you mentioned that your data goes into Airtable, right? So I'm going to assume that your database is Airtable, and then talk about 3 ways of how you can work with multiple records at once. So let's imagine that I want to go ahead and kind of aggregate every question that's been picked, right? So let me go, I have a picked column here, and let's give like 2 or 3 of them, right? And I want to maybe send an email to each one of those, or maybe I want to send an email to Connor before the stream, aggregating all of those records. A challenge with Zapier is that it assumes that there's a moment when this record is created, when picked is checked, it is confined to that record. So it only has information about the record. And the challenge is, how do I work across records that have a certain criteria, right? So in our case, it's going to be answer has been picked. So this is the kind of criteria. So the first and easiest way, and unfortunately the most limited, is to use the find records action in Airtable. So let's say that I want to go ahead and every morning, I'm just going to call this automation because I'm bad at naming things, right? So at a scheduled time, let's say every morning, starting every 1 at 8:30 a.m., I want to go ahead and find records, right? So then I could say, okay, go to our questions table and take the condition where picked is checked. So what that's going to do is going to return all 3 of these records. So let's run the test. It's going to return an array of records. Okay, boom. I've got my list of 0, which is the first record, 1, which is the second, right? So this looks, if you're familiar with, any kind of coding, if you will, this looks like an array. Now, you're kind of limited in what you can do after this, right? Because Airtable doesn't really work with arrays or just kind of this if then that kind of framework. What you can do, though, is send an email. So the kind of most common use case, and one you mentioned, Kyle, was, I want to send a summary, or I want to send every single item in this list, right? So I'm just going to kind of do an example here. So you can go to step 2, go to records, and then insert records as a list or as a grid. So let's add them in as a grid. I want to keep the name, link to video, the question, and the answer if there is one. Insert that. I need to configure all the fields. Okay, so let's just send it to myself. And it's going to be questions. There we go. Why don't I have a run? Do I have to run schedule time? I didn't connect a Gmail account. There we go. Oh no, I have to reconnect my Gmail account. Let's do this a little further away. No problem. Classic. Okay. Boom. Okay. And I can preview the email, right? So this is one example that's very limited where you could send the list of all the items, right? So let me know if that kind of broadly, at least, Kyle, answers your question. So Connor, any thoughts on this before I continue down this long explanation?
So I actually use this on my to-do list as like a digest for like projects that I'm currently working on, and it sends it to me every Monday with like all the outstanding projects. So I really like the way of doing it. One thing that I did want to know is it possible to get that grid that render as HTML grid, and then embed that into, say, a script where you use something like mailer send or whatever it is to send a transactional email?
Yes. So in that case, Right. So that's the next. Oh, okay. Yeah. So his audio should be good now. Thanks for that. Sorry about that. Let me know if it's good now. So sorry about that. It's coming in twice. You should be sounding good. I forgot to mute something there. Okay. Appreciate the notes. So your question is, can we then take what's found in that array and do something else with it, right? Maybe send it to, you mentioned MailerLite or some transactional email. And that's actually the second option, which is run a script where you can input the output of step 2, or just kind of go to your base and say, get me every record that has picked equal checked, and then run a certain kind of step here. So I'm not going to go through this, but this is an example where you can run a script and you can input from step 2 your array of records, right? So you can kind of input the HTML, but really just a list of record IDs, right? That's going to give you that array, and you could say record IDs like this. But this is very similar to kind of going to that table and then doing a dot filter based on a certain criteria. So that's just kind of saving you some. So the second way, and I do encourage you, kind of Kyle, if you're like, okay, we need to send some information to a third party, we need to automate this or that, it's actually quite easy within Airtable scripting to call APIs and do things like that. So what I would recommend is check out Learn Airtable Scripting. So you're able to write simple scripts that do that work on an array as an input. So that is the second way. So find records, send an email. You can run a script within that automation or at the click of a button, right? And then the last one, and I think the most no-code way, if you will, is to use a third party like Parabola and Integromat. And the reason I mentioned those two is because they work with arrays. So an example of this, you mentioned kind of two things. You want to work on an array and you want to do groupings or calculations on that array to say, take all restaurants, sum their revenue, output the sum as an email, and then take every single restaurant and send an email to them as well. So you can do that in Parabola. So here's an example where it goes to Stripe. It does some math on everything it's pulled out of Stripe. It groups it by criteria and then sends an email with the output of that format. But really, it has this kind of a option to do whatever you want with your array as an input. And you could run this on a schedule. You can run it on a webhook, so at the press of a button, and things like that. So simplest, Airtable, find records, send email. A little more complex, Airtable plus scripting. And then third, no code, much more flexible, but is another tool that you're not using, which would be Parabola. So let me know, Kyle, if that answers your question. And are there, while we're kind of chatting about this, Connor, any other questions, let me know in the chat.
No, that was very good. Very interesting.
Awesome. Glad we helped. So I'm going to drop the link. If folks have questions for next month, I'm going to go ahead and drop that. Boom. Dropping that in the chat. All right. Cool. Okay. So that was question of the month, and I forgot to drop our agenda. Man, I'm really forgetful today. So boom. All right. We're now at the tool of the month. And I'm doing this one, right, Connor? Man, I'm speaking a lot today. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Kyle, I'm glad we helped you out. Let's talk about this tool that I wanted to show to all of you, which is called Paytable. So our tool of the month this month is Paytable. And what I like about Paytable is it actually solves a pain point that I had when I started out in NoCode, right? So my first ever piece of content was this course called The Essential Guide to Airtable. And in order for me to provide that course to everyone, I sold it on Udemy, which was very cheap, and I didn't make much money off of that. But then I thought, it'd be really cool if I could have a website where people can log in, watch through the course, and I could, capture their email. And luckily, that's where Joe came in and helped me build AATT.io, which has a beautiful front end. It's built with MemberStack. It has a Webflow backend and an Airtable that syncs to Webflow. Now, that is 5 tools. It has Airtable, Zapier, MemberStack, Webflow, probably some Parabola in there somewhere. But I would have loved to be able to take all of that and just monetize my Airtable base where I was managing the course anyway. So that's where Paytable comes in. So Paytable is a way to monetize your Airtable bases without like 5 tools. It's literally one tool. So I'm going to show you the end product, right? So let's just go kind of here. Let me go to share and I'll show you guys what it looks like. So let me go ahead and open that. So this is my course, the Airtable base, where I manage my course, right? It has every single lesson, what section it's in, and you could buy it for $5. Literally, once you buy it, what it does is that it shows you the link where you can purchase the course or where you can watch the course. So I'm going to drop this in the chat, right? And I can probably drop it to $0 just to show you what it feels like. So how to set this up is actually super easy. All you do is you kind of configure your page. So I'm using Paytable. I have let's call this Essential Guide to Airtable. And then I have Buy My Course. Okay, let's say I'll keep the color. And it's $5. Save that. Cool. Now I have my page and it's ready to go. And then when people pay, I have to show them something different, right? I have to show them what's in the course. And that's just a different view, right? So I just have a view with the YouTube link that you can go to. It has access to the resources, gives you the status and the duration. And all of this in the backend is just a different view that I've embedded into Paytable. So Paytable is like the easiest way to monetize your Airtable bases. And it's perfect for someone who's like, oh, I want to share a list, a curated list, or I have a course and I don't want to set up, a $150 website with MemberStack, Airtable, Zapier, Parabola to sell that course. And this makes it super easy.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really great way to just get something up and running. I think especially if you're kind of just trying to validate like a little course, or even like maybe you don't even want to do a course, but you've got like a bunch of resources that you're curating. It's just a really nice way to get something up and running fast and to potentially charge a little bit of money for it. So yeah, this is real awesome.
Yeah, it's actually really, I wouldn't say cheap is not the right word, but you can make up to $100 before paying. And, Paytable is super new. So if you're using it and have any feedback, feel free to write to the founder. They're more than happy to help. And it's one of those things that I wish I had known Paytable way before, because it would have saved me such a headache, right? Of how to set up. So there's a question from Jeremy, which is, what is the cost of Paytable? And let me just go and figure that out. Pricing, I think it's $12 after you've made $100 a month, right? Mm. So there's no fees. Yeah, so it's essentially $12 a month. You can have up to 500, then you go up to $22 a month past 500, and it's free for your first $100 of revenue.
Mm-hmm. What exactly does one free product mean? Does that just mean one like course or one table?
Yeah, that's correct. That's my understanding. So if I go into my dashboard, right, I have one product, which is the Essential Guide to Airtable, but I could potentially have multiple products. And on the free plan, there's one. And then you have like a little simple dashboard. And huge thanks to Connor for being the only person to buy my course. And he, it means a lot because it's free on my website. And so
Refund.
I could refund you. Do you want me to
No,
refund you? So very simple, very useful. Do encourage everyone to check out Paytable as a kind of a simple way to get started and seeing whether your idea makes sense and whether people are willing to pay for it. And don't do like me and spend hundreds of dollars on Airtable, Zapier, Parabola, Webflow before you know you have an idea, especially if your course is free, which is what I did. So
Hit the refresh button, see if you got another one.
yeah. No,
Oh, Joe said he just bought it, but oh, that's funny.
Joe,
Oh,
you'll PayPal me $5 later. No worries. You've given me enough, Joe. It's okay. I don't need you buying my course. I appreciate all the help that you put in. Cool.
People are just buying your course to test if it works or not.
Yes, I'm happy to. Awesome. Okay, so Connor, you have our project of the month kind of talking to us. So every month we want to present a project that was built with no code that's a little different maybe than what we're used to, and you wanted to kind of show off a project this month.
Yeah, so Ben from MakerPad tweeted this. It's boatbyowners.co, and it's basically a marketplace where you can buy and sell boats. And so it was created with Softer, which is a tool I haven't used myself yet, but I've heard a lot about, and Zapier and Airtable. And so I suppose it's pretty self-explanatory. You can basically browse through a directory of boats, and if you have 85 grand lying around and you are interested in buying a boat, then you can just click into the boat, get a bit more information, and then reach out to the owner. And you can see a contact form that's at the bottom, which is basically the way that the lead generation happens. And this right here is like, I'm just a big fan of these kind of little niche marketplaces, because to me, this really highlights what is possible with no code now. So if you wanted to build something like this in the past, I mean, there'd be quite a lot involved with it. You'd have to get developers on board, all that kind of stuff. Even with how I build my marketplaces, there's quite a bit involved with it, like getting it up and running in Webflow and Airtable and gluing it all together. But being able to like just quickly spin something like this up and basically bring something to market in a niche as specific as boats is just awesome. And so yeah, I just definitely wanted to shout this project out because it's just a really great example of what you can do with these tools now.
Yeah. So I remember you, Connor, you sent it to me and you sent me like, what do you think of this? And what's cool is that I instantly recognized that it was a Airtable backend, because you can see in the URL, there's a record ID, right? Mm-hmm. And then if you actually go to the for sale, it's actually an Airtable attachment URL as well. So you can instantly see that it's kind of built on top of Airtable and really leverages that functionality that Airtable provides right out of the gate, right? And we did a stream on Softer. So Colleen, if you can drop a link in the chat where we built with Yohei, we built a kind of list of startups that his fund has invested in for their limited partners, for the investors in the fund. And I think we did that in about 45 minutes, right? So super easy, super simple way to create a marketplace with Softer and Airtable. Now, one thing I want to talk to you about is that how do you think about, or what is your suggestion, Connor, of like actually doing the transaction, right? Because this is like 320,000 euros. I can't imagine people are like putting in their credit card for that amount. There's probably some due diligence. There's probably legal things around where the boat is situated. Boating or international waters law is probably not a specialty of the creator of this marketplace. So for someone thinking about this, how would you approach that side of the marketplace?
Yeah, so I kind of feel specifically with marketplaces, there's like a lot that you can overthink when it comes to creating the transaction. Like I think a lot of people kind of get caught up in the payment or all that type of stuff. But really, the value that you are providing as a marketplace in the first instance is connecting people who are trying to sell something to people who are trying to buy something. So if you want to get something up and running fast, I mean, you can basically do what they've done here, create a lead generation form. And if you want to monetize it straight off the bat, you can come up with revenue share agreements with the people listing their boats. Because I assume that in this particular niche, if you are going to sell boats, you are probably going to have to find a handler who will basically connect you to buyers. So in a way, all you need to do in the first instance, or at least until you've created some transactions, is to just create a lead generation form. And that's exactly what I did with the Unicorn Factory as well when I set that up. All it was lead generation. You connect people with each other. And then as soon as you start creating those transactions and those values, then and that value for both the supply side and the demand side, then it becomes a lot easier to actually implement your pricing and business model into the platform. And so, long story short, what they've done here is probably the exact way that I'd approach it for, like an MVP.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think this is a perfect example that I think they mentioned at the bottom of the website. Like, their job is not to sell the boat; it's actually just to connect buyers and sellers. And you could imagine where a situation where you pay as the boat just to be on the marketplace, right? So you don't take 20% of the sale, but maybe you pay $500-$600 a month just to list, right? If you're able to do those connections, right?
Yep.
So it's not necessarily about taking a cut of the transaction. You can also just take a monthly fee, which absolves you to an extent of the legal worries about selling boats online in different jurisdictions. So really a kind of perfect example of something that's simple to get up and running, and is only possible because of software, Airtable, and where we are with NoCode today. So really appreciate this project, Connor. It was great.
Yeah. Also, just a quick little note on this one. It's like, I think where people kind of get caught up is like, how do I actually process the payments? Honestly, you can just come up with an agreement with the person whose boat you're listing, like a verbal agreement, and say, hey, if I find you a buyer, this is how much you can pay me. And that way you can skip the entire building part and the over engineering part of your platform. And yeah, just simple and straight to the point is like the key with these things. And I feel like they've just really nailed that here.
Yeah, and just everything on this stream is not legal advice. So I'm saying that here, and I'm saying that forever. All advice on this stream is not legal advice. It's not investment advice. I'm never going to give you investment advice. But the takeaway is don't overthink it. Start small. If you sell one boat, that's probably a year's worth of revenue, depending on where you live and how much you make. But selling one boat would be a fantastic achievement. So on that, I am not a lawyer, Ethan. I'm barely an Airtable expert, so definitely not a lawyer. Awesome. Anything else folks want to kind of talk about? We're kind of at the end of our agenda. Anything, Connor, you wanted to chat about before we head off to next week?
Joe has just left, but I feel like this is a good opportunity to just make a shout out to the Finsweet team for their release yesterday with their Chrome extension. So they had a stream about it, so I would definitely just go and check it out. But basically, they've shipped like 9 months worth of features inside of Webflow and with their Chrome extension. And the cool thing about it is it sits inside of the Webflow designer natively. So it kind of looks like it's just part of Webflow, which is amazing. And I think that they just went through the actual wish list inside of Webflow and just started ticking off all of those things. I don't know if the Chrome extension is live in the Chrome store right now. You will actually have to go and check out their stream, and there's a link in the stream that will basically send you an invite to it or whatever. But it's amazing. And like what they've done, like what Finsweet have been doing in like the Webflow community in general is just like amazing. If you even just look at the clone comp, but now just even stepping into like the product space and like really building some really useful features that a lot of people have been waiting for a very long time is very, very, very exciting.
I am lucky enough to just rely on Finsweet for all my front end, right? I am extremely grateful for what they do. If I didn't have that, I would probably have to learn Webflow front end, which I haven't, and it'd look awful. But I'm sure if I did, I would totally use this Chrome extension. So do check it out. I just dropped, Jeremy, the link in the chat. So I think that's a perfect place to end. I would recommend everyone to go watch that stream and go install the Finsweet Chrome extension. And this was No Code Talk number 2. Connor, honor, pleasure to have you on. We'll be back next month, September, first Wednesday of September. And it was a pleasure. Thanks, Ethan, Jeremy, Colleen, Joe. I saw Raymar in here as well. Tommy, really appreciate all of you coming out. And I will see you all next month. With that, have a great month. Have a great week. Bye, Connor.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.